When everything falls apart, most people die. Not from the initial event, from the weeks that follow, from decisions made in panic, from skills they never learned, from mindsets that worked in civilization but become suicide in chaos. But some people don't die. They navigate the collapse like they've done it before. They make the right calls when everyone else is freezing. They find resources when others starve. They avoid dangers that kill the prepared and unprepared alike. These aren't the people you'd expect. Not necessarily the ones with the biggest stockpiles. Not the tactical operators with military training. Not the wealthy with bunkers and escape plans. The survivors come from specific archetypes that share traits nobody talks about. Traits that matter more than gear, more than guns, more than any preparation you can buy. The preppers don't want to admit this because it undermines their business model. The survivalists don't want to admit it because it challenges their identity. But the truth is simple. Survival in collapse isn't about what you have. It's about who you are. 5 types of people always survive collapse. Always. Throughout history, across every civilization that fell, these 5 archetypes made it to the other side, while everyone else became bodies and bones. Here's who they are, why they survive, and what they never tell you about how they do it. Survivor. Type 1. The Gray Man. Invisible by design. You've never noticed this person. That's the point. They're unremarkable in every way. Average height, average build, forgettable face, clothes that blend into any crowd. They don't stand out in good times, and they certainly don't stand out when standing out gets you killed. The Gray Man isn't hiding. They're existing in a state of permanent camouflage, not in the woods, in society. They've trained themselves to be the person your eyes slide past. The one you can't describe 5 minutes after meeting them. The one who is definitely there but you can't remember what they looked like. Why they survive. In collapse, visibility is death. The person with the nice gear gets robbed. The person who looks prepared becomes a target. The person who seems wealthy, capable, or resourceful gets surrounded by people who want what they have. The Gray Man has nothing worth taking. Or at least, they look like they have nothing worth taking. Their supplies are hidden. Their skills are concealed. Their capabilities are invisible until the moment they need them. They move through collapsing society like a ghost, noticed by no one, remembered by no one, targeted by no one. They survive the first wave because predators don't see them. They survive the second wave because organized groups don't recruit them or eliminate them as competition. They survive the long haul because they've conserved resources and energy that visible people spent on defense. What they never tell you? Being invisible is a skill you develop, not a trait you're born with. The Gray Man has practiced this for years. They've studied how to move without attracting attention, how to dress without standing out, how to speak without being memorable, how to exist without creating ripples. They've deliberately cultivated boringness, no flashy car, no distinctive clothes, no strong opinions expressed publicly, no social media presence that creates a target. They've sacrificed the ego satisfaction of being noticed for the survival advantage of being forgotten. They also never tell you how hard it is psychologically. Humans want recognition. We want to be seen, appreciated, remembered. The Gray Man has killed that impulse. They've accepted that anonymity is worth more than acknowledgement. That's a psychological discipline most people can't maintain. The Gray Man doesn't just survive the collapse. They were already surviving normal society in a way that prepared them for collapse. They understood before anyone else that visibility is vulnerability. They just never told you because telling you would make them visible. Survivor Type 2, the Adapter. Flexibility over preparation. This person has no stockpile, no bunker, no bug-out bag. They might not even own a weapon. On paper, they're completely unprepared for collapse. In reality, they're among the most likely to survive. The adapter doesn't prepare for specific scenarios. They prepare for the ability to respond to any scenario. Their skill isn't hoarding resources, it's making resources from whatever's available. Their advantage isn't having plans. It's making plans on the fly that actually work. When the grid goes down, the adapter doesn't panic because they already lived without reliable grid. Not as a prepper exercise, just as life. They've been broke, homeless, displaced, marginalized. They've already survived conditions that would break people who've never experienced hardship. Why they survive. Rigidity kills in collapse. The person with the perfect plan dies when the situation doesn't match the plan. The person with the perfect supplies dies when those supplies are stolen or destroyed. The person with the perfect bug-out location dies when they can't reach it. The adapter has no perfect anything. They have functional everything. They can eat what's available, even if it's disgusting. They can sleep where they find themselves, even if it's uncomfortable. They can build shelter from debris. They can create tools from trash. They can solve problems that have no obvious solutions. Collapse is chaos. Chaos rewards flexibility. The adapter thrives in chaos because they've never relied on order. What they never tell you, their advantage came from disadvantage. The adapter survived collapse before. Not civilizational collapse, personal collapse. Poverty, addiction, abuse, displacement, crisis. They've already lost everything and rebuilt. And they've already hit bottom and climbed back up. The collapse is just a larger scale version of what they've already experienced. They never tell you this because it's not advice you can use. Go be poor for a decade isn't actionable preparation, but it's the truth. The adapter's survival skills weren't learned from books or courses. They were learned from necessity, from having no choice but to adapt or die. They also never tell you about the emotional calluses. They've seen people die from the same conditions they survived. They know luck played a role. They know they're not special, just stubborn. They don't romanticize survival because they know what it actually costs. The adapter survives because collapse to them isn't new. It's just familiar territory at a different address. Survivor Type 3, the connector, network over stockpile. This person might have less food stored than you, fewer weapons, less training, but they have something more valuable than all of it combined. They have relationships, deep, reciprocal, reliable relationships with people across multiple domains. The connector isn't popular. Popularity is shallow. The connector has invested years in genuine relationships built on mutual benefit, trust, and proven reliability. They've helped people when they didn't have to. They've kept promises when it was inconvenient. They've built a network of people who owe them and who they can call on. Why they survive. Solo survival has a ceiling. One person can only do so much. They can only watch so many directions. They can only have so many skills. They can only carry so much. Eventually, solo survivors get overwhelmed by problems that require multiple people to solve. The connector is never solo, not because they live in a compound, because they can call in favors. They can access skills they don't have. They can share burdens. They can trade information, resources, and labor. When collapse hits, the connector's network activates. The nurse they helped years ago provides medical care. The farmer they built a fence for shares food. The mechanic they supported through a rough patch keeps vehicles running. The ex-military neighbor they befriended provides security knowledge. The connector survives because they're part of something larger than themselves. They're a node in a network that collectively has more capability than any individual could accumulate. What they never tell you? Building these relationships takes years. It can't be faked or rushed. You can't suddenly become friends with useful people when collapse starts. The relationships have to exist before you need them. The trust has to be established through demonstrated reliability. They also never tell you about the costs. Maintaining a network requires constant investment, time, energy, resources given without immediate return, favors done when you'd rather not, being available when you'd rather be alone. The connector has been paying into this network for years before withdrawal becomes necessary. The relationships aren't transactional in the crass sense. They're genuinely caring connections, but they're also strategically developed. The connector chose to build relationships with people who have complementary skills. That wasn't accidental. That was foresight disguised as friendship. The connector survives because they understood something preppers often miss. You can't stockpile trust. You can only earn it over time. And in collapse, trust is worth more than gold. Survivor Type 4, the student. Continuous learning over fixed knowledge. This person is always learning. Not survival skills specifically, though they learn those too. Everything. How engines work, how plants grow, how people think, how systems function. They're perpetually curious, perpetually absorbing information, perpetually expanding what they know. The student isn't a know-it-all. They're the opposite. They're acutely aware of how much they don't know. That awareness drives them to keep learning. Every person they meet is a potential teacher. Every experience is a lesson. Every failure is data. Why they survive? Collapse creates novel problems. Problems nobody has seen before in exactly that configuration. The person with fixed knowledge from training or books has a limited toolbox. When problems exceed that toolbox, they're stuck. The student learns on the fly. They observe what's working and what isn't. They ask questions when others assume they already know. They experiment when others follow failing protocols. They update their mental models in real time as new information arrives. In the first weeks of collapse, the student is learning faster than the collapse is evolving. They're adapting their approach based on what's actually happening, not what they assumed would happen. They're ahead of the curve because they never stop observing and integrating. What they never tell you, their learning isn't casual interest, it's obsession. The student has been consuming information for years before collapse. They've read hundreds of books on diverse topics. They've practiced skills outside their profession. They've deliberately exposed themselves to unfamiliar domains. They never tell you about the social cost. Being constantly curious, constantly learning, constantly asking questions makes you annoying to people who prefer comfortable ignorance. The student has been dismissed as too intense, overthinking things, or wasting time on impractical knowledge. They kept learning anyway. The learning is also strategic. The student prioritizes knowledge that's resilient and transferable. Not how to use specific software, but how computers work fundamentally. Not how to navigate with a specific GPS, but how to read landscape and celestial navigation. They learn principles, not procedures. The student survives because knowledge is the one supply that can't be stolen, can't be consumed, and never runs out. Every other resource depletes, knowledge compounds. Survivor Type 5, the realist. Psychological preparation over material. Preparation. This person sees the world as it is, not as they wish it were. They've accepted hard truths that others refuse to acknowledge. They've stared into the darkest possibilities and made peace with them. They're not optimistic or pessimistic. They're realistic. The realist has run the scenarios. They know that most people they care about will probably die in a real collapse. They know they might die too. They know civilization is fragile. They know violence is always an option people will choose. They know morality erodes when survival is threatened. They've accepted all of this, not intellectually, emotionally. They've grieved the future in advance. They've let go of assumptions that will cripple others when reality contradicts them. Why they survive? Psychological collapse precedes physical collapse for most people. They freeze, panic, deny, bargain, and rage, while the realist is already acting. The psychological processing that others do during the crisis, the realist did beforehand. They're not slowed by shock, because nothing is surprising them. When violence happens, the realist doesn't waste time being appalled. They respond. When friends betray, the realist doesn't waste time being hurt. They adapt. When systems fail, the realist doesn't waste time being outraged. They find alternatives. The realist moves faster than everyone else because they're not dragging the weight of denial. They're operating on accurate assumptions while others are operating on fantasy. What they never tell you: becoming a realist is painful. It requires confronting mortality, failure, loss, and human darkness. It requires releasing comforting illusions that most people cling to desperately. It requires sitting with truths that make you cry, rage, and despair before you reach acceptance. They never tell you because they can't explain it. The process is internal. You can't teach someone to accept hard truths. They have to choose to confront them. Most people won't. Most people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. The realist just stopped preferring comfort over accuracy. The realist also never tells you about the loneliness. Seeing the world clearly while others live in denial is isolating. You can't share your perspective without being dismissed as negative, paranoid, or disturbed. So you stay quiet, watching others sleepwalk toward dangers you see clearly. The realist survives because collapse doesn't break them. They're already broken. They've already processed the grief and horror. What would shatter others just confirms what they already accepted. They're sad, but they're not surprised. And sadness doesn't stop you from surviving. Surprise and denial do. What these 5 types share: the common thread. These 5 archetypes seem different. The gray man avoids attention. The adapter improvises from nothing. The connector builds networks. The student learns constantly. The realist accepts hard truths, but they share something fundamental. All 5 prioritize internal capabilities over external supplies. The gray man's camouflage is skill and behavior, not gear. The adapter's flexibility is mindset, not equipment. The connector's network is social capital, not material capital. The student's knowledge is internal, not stored. The realist's preparation is psychological, not physical. This isn't accidental. All 5 have realized something the typical prepper hasn't. Stuff can be taken from you. Skills cannot. Supplies run out. Mindset persists. Locations can be lost. Relationships travel with you. Things are vulnerable. You are resilient. The prepper industry sells things because things are profitable. Survival courses sell skills because skills are commodified knowledge. But the deepest survival advantages aren't for sale. You develop them through years of deliberate cultivation that no product or course can shortcut. Why most preppers die: the uncomfortable truth. Most preppers approach survival wrong. They accumulate supplies while neglecting the traits that actually determine survival. They buy gear instead of developing skills. They stockpile food instead of building relationships. They plan for specific scenarios instead of cultivating general adaptability. When collapse comes, the prepper with the bunker becomes a target. Everyone knows about the bunker. The prepper with visible tactical gear gets robbed or killed for it. The prepper with rigid plans falls apart when reality doesn't match their assumptions. The 5 survivor types don't make these mistakes because they understand something fundamental. Survival isn't about having the most stuff. It's about being the most adaptable, connected, knowledgeable, invisible, and psychologically prepared person in any situation. Stuff is a crutch. The 5 survivor types don't need crutches. They've built capabilities that don't depend on things that can be lost, stolen, or destroyed. Becoming the survivor. What you can actually do. You're probably not fully any of these 5 types. Most people aren't. But you can cultivate aspects of each. Practice being invisible. Wear unremarkable clothes. Avoid drawing attention. Learn to move through spaces without creating memories in observers. Build the gray man skill set even if you never become fully gray. Develop adaptability. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations that require improvisation. Travel without complete plans. Take on projects you don't know how to complete. Force yourself to figure things out without all the resources you'd prefer. Build real relationships, not networking for advantage. Genuine connection with genuine reliability. Help people without expecting return. Keep promises even when inconvenient. Invest in relationships with people who have diverse skills and perspectives. Learn constantly. Read widely across domains. Practice skills outside your profession. Stay curious about how things work. Ask questions when you don't understand. Treat every person as a potential teacher. Confront reality. Run the hard scenarios in your mind. Accept that bad things can happen to you and people you love. Process the grief and fear before you need to. Develop accurate expectations about human behavior under stress. None of this requires money. None of it requires buying products. All of it requires time, intention, and the willingness to develop yourself in ways that feel uncomfortable. The secret they all share and never speak. There's one more thing the 5 survivor types have in common. Something none of them talk about because it sounds wrong. Because it contradicts the narrative that survival is noble and good people survive through goodness. All 5 are willing to do what's necessary. Not eager, not excited, not sociopathic, but willing. When survival requires actions that would be unthinkable in normal times, they don't freeze. They don't waste time on moral paralysis. They do what they have to do and process the guilt later. The gray man is willing to let others be targeted while they escape notice. The adapter is willing to take resources from those who can't use them effectively. The connector is willing to prioritize their network over outsiders who aren't part of it. The student is willing to apply knowledge in ways that have harmful applications. The realist has already accepted that survival might require choices that haunt them forever. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The 5 survivor types understand that survival and moral purity are sometimes mutually exclusive. They've made their choice in advance. They've chosen to survive first and process the consequences second. This is the secret no survival guide will tell you. The people who survive collapse aren't necessarily the best people. They're the ones who can live with difficult choices. The ones who don't hesitate when hesitation is fatal. The ones who prioritize their survival and the survival of their people over abstract principles. Is this ugly? Yes. Is it true? Look at every historical collapse. The survivors weren't the most ethical. They were the most ruthlessly pragmatic when they needed to be. The final truth. Survival is who you are. Collapse is coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in decades, maybe never in your lifetime, but somewhere. Sometime, systems will fail, and the thin veneer of civilization will crack. When it happens, the question won't be what you have. It will be who you are. Are you invisible enough to avoid being targeted? Are you adaptable enough to handle conditions you didn't anticipate? Are you connected enough to call on help when you need it? Are you knowledgeable enough to solve problems with no instructions? Are you realistic enough to act without psychological collapse? The 5 survivor types have spent years becoming who they need to be. They didn't buy survival. They built it into their character. They developed traits that serve them whether collapse comes or not. That's the final secret. The traits that help you survive collapse also help you thrive in normal life. Invisibility protects you from social predators. Adaptability helps you navigate career changes. Connections provide support in every crisis. Knowledge compounds in value constantly. Realism prevents you from being blindsided by life's inevitable hardships. The 5 survivor types aren't preparing for collapse. They're optimizing for reality. Collapse survival is just a side effect of being effective in a complex, uncertain world. You can become one of these types, or you can cultivate aspects of all 5. But you have to start now. You can't become invisible overnight. You can't build deep relationships in a week. You can't learn enough in a month. You can't develop adaptability without practice. You can't become a realist without confronting truths you'd rather avoid. Start now. Develop yourself. Become the person who survives, not because of what they own, but because of who they are. That's what the 5 survivor types never tell you. Not because it's secret, because it's obvious to them, and they assume you already know. Now you do. What you do with it determines whether you're one of the 5 or one of the many who don't make it. The choice, as always, is yours.